12, 3, 4, 7. And Jarvis is back, and we are together here just after Memorial Day weekend wrapped up and the beginning of summer. Thank you, as always, for joining me. And how excited are you about this summer? Big plans, I'm guessing.
No, no, I'm old. I'm too white. I can't go in the sun.
Right.
No, I stay inside.
Do you have any traditions for Memorial Day weekend? Did you watch the auto race car driving?
No, I'm not American.
You're not.
Did you? What did you do?
I went to my parents' house. I drove up the 4 hours so I could watch the Syracuse University lacrosse men play in the Final Four with my dad. My dad's 80. He said, "Why don't you come up and watch the game with me?" And I said, "Okay."
Cool. Did you play lacrosse?
My whole life.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I say my whole life. I mean, all the way through high school and a year of college in lacrosse. I was on the lacrosse team.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's kind of a private school boys game, isn't it?
Not in Central New York. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Around the country, historically has been. Central New York was where the Iroquois and other Native American tribes invented it. So we would play against the neighboring school. Many of them lived on the reservation and went to that public school, and then we would play against them, and we would be scared of them
Because they were good.
they were good, and we were, a bit, I guess, racist. To be afraid of Native Americans is to be
Now,
racist.
were there also prep schools in that mix?
Not where we was. All public
Okay.
school league where I played. I didn't. Should be fair. I sat the bench.
Humility.
I was a tiny little fella, Jeff. So did you not play sports growing up?
I was too much body for one brain to handle. No,
Did
no.
they have sports when you were little?
They did. We threw rocks and did fascinating things like that. My great people. You can make fun of me now. My only letter was for being the track team's manager.
Oh, well, that led you to a career in journalism, I guess.
Yeah, just being the loser, the outsider, the dork.
What was your height? What is your height?
6'4".
Man, and you didn't take advantage of that.
So I moved a lot, and we'd hit the new high school, and the coach would see me, the basketball coach, and I'd say, "That's not what it appears."
You would see at each new school, you would have a picture of the basketball coach. So as when he would approach you, you just put your hand up and like, I'm not in. I'm not. Sorry.
No, my only sport was getting medicals to get out of phys ed.
Oh, Jarvis. I love it. Good. Well, you've got a lot of.
To this day, I have it's why my fear of coaches and their ridicule had an impact on me.
Oh, go ahead. What happened when you were little?
Yeah, and I was always the clumsy one. I was always the last one picked for the team.
Yeah.
Oh, we're gonna get a lot of tears now.
Yeah.
And as a result, I hated sports. I dreaded sports, and so while others are often, I mean, I try now to watch some more sports, but I hated them.
Does that feed your feelings and your aversions to traditional masculinity?
It's why I'm liberal.
Oh, right. It's your It made you more
Yes.
liberal to be.
Yeah, because I'm feminized,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk with you about gender a lot. I don't think we'll have time today because there's a bunch of issues I wanted to get to and get through here with you. First, let's just dispense with the idea that Rahm Emanuel might be a serious candidate to run for president, or that we're talking really about names, but this is the way it works. And I think it's important in the public interest for you in this case to criticize the speculation that's being done. It starts with an article or an op-ed, and then the cable talkers start discussing it. It's a trial balloon. What do you think is happening, and why should we care at all?
I'm heartened by the reaction to my posting that on the socials. Everyone is saying, no, Rahm Emanuel, go away. Go to some island with Fetterman and Newsom now, who's also ruined himself, I think, and just leave us alone. I think we do have a crisis in terms of finding leadership, as we've talked about before, and great candidates who are going to excite us. But it ain't Rahm Emanuel, and people forget, by the way, the brotherhood there. That Rahm Emanuel's one brother is Ari Emanuel, the legendary
Power
agent,
entertainment.
power agent. And his other brother is Dr. Zeke Emanuel, who I'm pissed off at this week because he was, as soon as Joe Biden's diagnosis of prostate cancer, and I'm a brother of prostate cancer, came out, Zeke was presuming how long he'd had it. And there was a wall. Pete, you know what's the most frightening thing to me these days? I find myself agreeing with things in the Wall Street Journal. This scares me to death.
Well, that's okay, because sometimes they're making some good points that I think it's fair to mention those. And I'm glad you do give
clock. So there was a column.
I saw that segment, the whole segment. I happened to be watching. I rarely do, maybe once a week. And it was the day after the news broke of President Biden's cancer diagnosis. And Zeke Emanuel, Rahm's brother, there's three very well-known, quote, successful brothers, and he was speculating on how long they must have known. They must have known, or they had really bad doctors. And you know what? The president doesn't have bad doctors. He has the best doctors. And so they must have known, and that was the general consensus.
Well, and the irony here is that he was lambasting them. At the same time, what the Wall Street Journal column said was that Zeke Emanuel is one of those who says, oh, we shouldn't be testing, we're over testing, we shouldn't be finding out, which from a statistical viewpoint might make some sense, but from an individual viewpoint makes no sense. I'm glad I got tested for prostate cancer. I'm glad I got it out damn spot. But the point is that the statisticians say that we should stop testing after age 70. Well, Biden evidently wasn't tested after age 70. There is a view that by testing after a certain age, when most men end up getting prostate cancer, it leads to over-treatment, yada, 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 yada. But Emanuel should not have been diagnosing and commenting on Biden without knowing the facts. So I'm pissed at him.
Fair enough. I was wondering about that, and I was surprised it didn't get more traction, the conversation about his cancer diagnosis. And corresponding, obviously, was just the week before, I guess, Jay Tapper and Alex Thompson released their book about Joe Biden and his, I don't know what everybody knows what you're talking about. So let's get back to Rahm Emanuel and your thoughts on him being floated by who wrote the op-ed? I forget.
I forget. I don't have it handy.
I'll find it while you tell me.
Wall Street Journal, Zeke Emanuel. The Tyranny of Experts. So I hated that headline. Alicia Finley, who is just a columnist, I guess, at the Wall Street Journal. And it goes off into, she's blaming liberals. I mean, it goes off the way the Journal always will. But it's arguing that this notion that we should stop testing is deference to experts who say they know better. Now, I think that's a weird framing, and it's an anti-intellectual framing, and I don't like that. Instead it's deference to, I think, against statisticians who say that the cost of treating older people ain't worth it. Well, I'd like to think now that I'm older, I'm worth it, and the effort isn't worth it. But in any case,
Biden's prostate cancer and the Tyranny of Experts, the Wall Street Journal by Alicia Finley. All right, let me go down to Rahm Emanuel.
Right, back to Rahm.
So Rahm is floated. Somebody writes an op-ed about him, is the one I think I was referring to. That, yeah, here it is. Rahm Emanuel teasing a White House bid, says Democratic brand is weak. Again, the Wall Street Journal. Pelosi thinks Rahm Emanuel will run for president. Rahm Emanuel seems to be testing a 2028 run. And finally, Mediaite. Rahm Emanuel tells Wall Street Journal Democrats must move to the center to win.
You see, this is what drives me nuts. So you have Democrats who are out there like Rahm Emanuel. He calls the party brand toxic, weak, and woke. So now weak and woke is the phrase of the morning. Heilemann was saying it this morning on Morning Joe. It's going to spread around. Democrats are weak and woke, weak and woke. Well, all that does is buy into the Trumpist framework and the Trumpist rhetoric. And it makes it's why I've always been mad at us liberals for having given up the word liberal, because that got cooties and we instead had to be progressive. No, let's embrace the fact that we're liberal, and let's embrace being woke. Damn it, woke's okay, even if it was a concept stolen from black culture. Let's still embrace it. And I think this idea that we have to be that self-critical is not going to get us votes. We're going to have to get excited about positive vision for America. and not the same old players. And then when Pelosi is the one who's excited about you, what does that say? I mean, I've admired her in the past, but another story that's out right now is how many Democrats are dying because they're so damned old. And Biden is old. I admire and greatly respect Biden, but he's old. And we've lost another old member of Congress in Connolly. And so I'm curious what you think, Pete, about the David Hogg campaign to get rid of all the oldsters and get in the young people, and how he's doing it. What do you think of that?
I agree with the concept. I don't know about the process. I think it's that's a very heavy lift as a political strategy. It would seem to get behind. I like it, but people are going to hold on to their seats for dear life. Certainly the Democrats have done that. And I mean, from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, obviously, all the way to Joe Biden to Senator Feinstein and more. Nancy Pelosi is still there, obviously, and still highly influential. But yeah, I think the idea is just my moral premise, and I've said this a million times, is I just don't think that you should be allowed to, or there should be a law against people signing up to work for public service or for the government at a certain age. Like when you're 75 or 79 and you're signing a 2-year or 4-year contract, no, do any other job. Go do anything in the private sector you want in the entire world. Go be a content creator. But
because it's so much fun.
Don't run for office.
Yeah, and the time comes when it's time to make room. I mean, that's part of the reason I left my last job at the City University of New York was mainly because I didn't get along with the dean. But I also left because it was time for me to leave. It was time to open up space for somebody else.
Hard thing. You did a brave, courageous, original thing. You've done that your whole career, though. You have adapted and shifted so many different ways. You've had 70.
Well, I also stuck around too long, but that's okay. I thought I was still okay. I thought I was still doing something. I tried to use my status. I came late to trying to use my status and tenure and old white male cis privilege for good, but at some point you still have to just get out.
You certainly have, but staying too long is the question. But you asked me, about David Hogg's strategy to get young blood in, I guess, new blood, young blood, diverse blood. I don't know the strategy. I don't know. I think that the Democratic Party is a giant machine. It always will be. I'm bored with the criticism of it, we're in it. Let's work as hard as we can. Let's fight. Let's not give in on our morals and our values. And I would like to announce the launch of a new podcast that Jeff and I will be hosting called Weak and Woke. I don't know who's who.
Who's weak and who's woke here?
I think we're both. So we both are both. We could wear hats. We could actually have hats that say weak.
We could have t-shirts pointing to each other.
We absolutely are going to do it just as a bit one time. And all we're going to talk about is how weak and woke we are. So anyway, back to Rahm and moving to the center and
the center, that notion of the mythical center is such BS because all that does is drive us all to the right. Pisses me off.
Absolutely. And what are we talking about? On what issue? They get so wrapped up, Democrats and liberals, in language, just language, like the actual use of language, forgetting, of course, that the real censoring types are on the right and in government, censoring the most important language to solve problems like climate change and credit default swaps.
Well, I think it was the Post that had a piece this week about the language the Democrats are using, and they have to find new words. No, let's judge the language of the Washington Post and the New York Times and their refusal to use the words fascist and authoritarian and racist and bigoted. That's the direct language we should be using instead of making fun of us for saying equity. Equity is now a bad word? Jesus.
I got to ask you one general question. When you hear people on our team, Earth One, I don't know what we want to call ourselves, non-Trumpers, non-MAGA people, and even non-political people get exasperated as to why people support Donald Trump, we often say some kind of refrain like, I'll never understand these people. I'll never understand why they support him. I have a bunch of answers to that, but they're generally around, well, that's the news feed that they get and the type of things and way that he is, they like that, and you don't, and that's why it's hard to understand. They're getting a whole different truth and so on. But Jeff, I just have to say, I'm falling into my own trap, which is his Memorial Day posts were so gross. And his behavior was so gross. He left West Point without shaking hands, even though Biden shook all the hands, because he wanted to go golfing. And then he called people scum in his Memorial Day post. And so I just wonder what you think about all that people say, I'll never understand. And then I say, well, listen, you got to understand they're different. They watch them. And then at the same time, I fall into my own trap going, how could you support a man who on Memorial Day would say such things and do such things?
So I'm going to go down a rat hole, a Jeff hole. About 2 weeks ago, I read a piece in Der Spiegel, something. I used Google Translate to help me out. But it was a fascinating piece about what happens in media in Germany now that the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, the far-right extremist party, has been classified as extremist, which in German law matters for obvious reasons. And so they're asking, what do we do in media now? How do we cover them? And it was a really interesting piece trying to explore, because basically they're being shunned, but they're powerful and they're gaining votes. And so how do we cover them? And this report cited a paper by Vicente Valentim, a Portuguese scholar, entitled "The Normalization of the Radical Right: A Norms Theory of Political Supply and Demand." And it was really interesting, Pete, because it argued against the idea that people are being radicalized. This is the presumption that you take a perfectly normal human being, a lump of clay, and then you expose them to YouTube, or you expose them to Joe Rogan, or you expose them whatever, and suddenly they're radicalized and they go nuts. And Valentin says no. He says the people who have these views out loud now always had those views, or for a long time most of them did. What didn't bring them out was norms. That it was considered rude, it was considered yucky, it was considered awful, it was considered disgusting, offensive to say these things. And so people didn't say them because they self-restricted themselves. It was inside, but they didn't say them. And politicians didn't run on these things because they didn't hear it out loud in public discourse.
Right.
And then the paper says that it takes an event like 9/11 or like migrants flooding into Europe to suddenly open the window, the old Overton window a little bit, and people start saying these things out loud, and they find out that they can. And the politicians then hear it. And then the politicians run on it. And the politicians win on it. And then it becomes this self-fulfilling cycle of yuck, right, that comes out. And that the question then becomes, what do we do about the norms? While media are pressing us now to say, you have to understand them, you have to listen to them, you have to empathize with them. No, I'm not going to empathize with bigotry. I'm not going to empathize with racism and fascism. But that's the reflex of media, is that they were somehow made this way and we can unmake them. No, they were this way, and we've got to recognize that. And the way they were is racist. We too often do not acknowledge that analysis of what's going on. And now it's possible to say equity is a dirty word. DEI is a dirty word. White people should have more privilege. The basis of all of that is race. So how do you get to the other end of that? I don't know. How do we make people? I think we on Earth One have to start shaming them again. Have to start embarrassing them. Have to start demanding that media judge them, because otherwise, I see no way out of this.
And as well as sexism and
misogyny,
anti-gay attitudes, all of it.
Yep.
Did you see Scott Pelley? Did you see Scott Pelley at the commencement speech at Wake Forest?
No.
Said something very similar to kind of how you're talking about it. Just not normalizing the bigotry and hatred, which is now, as you say, been allowed to come right out in the open, and it's all over. It's the real woke mind virus that Elon Musk. Let me ask you about him. Seems like he disappeared. There's been a lot of writing about that he didn't have such a good experience, and he's got to go focus on his companies, which are which are floundering. Have you paid any attention to reporting on him and his current role? He was there that last week with the South African president, maybe only because it's so important to him because it's his own homeland, and his issue.
Well, I think he got an L on his forehead because of Michigan, right? He spent a fortune. Was it Michigan or was it, what state was it?
Oh, losing the judgeship in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, thank you. I knew it wasn't Michigan. I was confused them. Flyover. Sorry. I'm from flyover country. Don't take insult. Wisconsin. I think that he lost there. He lost a lot of money. He lost the election. I think he showed himself to not be worth their attention. So I think that he has political cooties about him now. A. B. His companies are suffering. Not that him returning to it is going to fix it, because his brand is so toxic. BYD is now outselling Tesla in Europe, the Chinese car company. He's a failure in all kinds of ways. I'm glad the world can finally recognize he's a rich failure, which just shows how stupid markets can be. But I don't think he's gone. I think his vile opinions will still course their way through the public discourse.
Conversation about manufacturing in America, if you have it with anybody with just a little bit of sense of things, you have to ask, well, manufacturing what what kind of jobs are those? How do they pay? Where would those factories or places be? And Trump has waded in with his ideas. He basically said, I don't think we should be like necessarily doing socks and shirts and things like that. That's not for us. But the idea being that we produce products that take higher skills, they're better paying jobs, they're safe jobs, but they make a lot of money, good money, companies. And then the thing that's not being said or asked is, how can you invest in future manufacturing and technology production if you're not invested in renewable energy and all of the technologies that have risen up that are making billions around the world for capitalists to fight climate change? You're not going to invest in that. You're going to disinvest in that. Well, what factories then are we building between pencil socks and shirts and batteries and microchips, Jeff?
My analysis of this is becoming a little bit different, that I think it's part of the anti-intellectualism of Trump and the right.
The anti-intellectualist theory.
Because we don't want to invest in high-end thought. We don't want to invest in education. We want to invest in plain old blue-collar jobs. Witness, as just one small symptom, in his horrible attack on Harvard this week, he said, we should take away all the money from Harvard and give it to vocational schools. So the view is that the future of America is a regression to a pre-internet, pre-digital dark ages, where the lemmings, the sheeple in the Republican Party, are manually putting together phones. And there's not a lot of future in that.
I just saw one of the comments in the live chat, which I try not to pay attention to. And it's my friend Aaron, says the big money is in sex robots for incel. Had to read it.
By the way, just back on one second. In the discussion this morning about Rahm Emanuel and John Halliman, who usually amuses me, I think he's a smart guy, but they were also parroting this idea that the people we have to pay attention to are young men. That we have to. It's part of that idea that we have to pay homage to the obnoxious people and try to convince them not to be obnoxious. When in fact, it's the women, as you often say and you're so good at, who are our best hope of saving us from all this crap and all the testosterone that is ruining society. And the Democratic Party should be playing strongly to women, especially black women and black men, and not to incel white men. Screw them. They're a lost cause.
I don't think, by the way, I don't think you have to choose. I think that
No.
I think we do have to talk to men and young men directly and in a way that resonates with them and gives them something to care about, much less vote for, and see a role and a place for them.
But if you skew everything back to Emmanuel,
but you don't
to try to please them,
Yeah.
you're losing your mission.
I certainly believe that. and I think that we can unpack it a lot more. But let me ask you about AI too, because is there like a starter pack? Is there a series of books or articles that you suggest, given your judgment, understanding of the technology and where it's at? Because I'm having more and more conversations everywhere about it. And some of my smartest friends are really worried, specifically, most imminently, in its effect on the economy. And that the economy could, as we see it, the current economy, the way it is, it could collapse. It could really fragment given AI and the jobs that it's going to take and how that interacts. Do you have a strong opinion on that question about AI's effect on imminently on our economy within the next 5 to 10 years?
I do. And by the way, I should plug them. I guess I'm on two AI podcasts now because everybody's got to have an AI podcast. One called AI Inside and one called Intelligent Machines. And so we talk about this a lot. I'm fascinated by AI. I think that it can do a lot of things. I'm working on a new degree program at Stony Brook on technology, AI, and society. I wrote a book called get the plugs out of the way, The Web We Weave, which is about the internet and AI. So I'm not at all against AI, but it's being overhyped to an extreme and a damaging extreme. And so far, what we're finding is it hasn't changed productivity. It's not changing jobs greatly yet. Some specifics, of course, anecdotally, yes. But I think that it's being overblown in its potential and in its effect so far. That's not to say that there can't be more effect, but we've got to tear down the hype here. I just finished a wonderful book called More Everything Forever by Adam Becker, which is very good at puncturing the hype of this. And there's other books out there that I'd recommend. Emily Bender has a new book out with Alex Hanna, co-author, whose name I'm suddenly forgetting, about AI hype. But I wouldn't just read the things about hype. I think I'd read the things that also express what AI can do. But it's overblown. The problem, Pete, is that the language around AI has been co-opted by the boys. So I think we've talked about this a little bit in prior weeks, where the doomsters, the people who believe that AI is going to destroy the world, is so powerful, and they are so powerful to have made it, that it can take over everything. That's egotistical BS. Same with the idea of artificial general intelligence. We're nowhere near. The machine has no sense of meaning. It's nowhere. It's not really reasoning. It looks to us like it is. We are imbuing in it the meaning we want to imbue in it. I would strongly recommend folks, if they're interested in this, look up Google TESCREAL, TESCREAL, which is an acronym for the faux philosophies that guide these wackadoodles who have too much money and too much power. And one of the leading scholars, Timnit Gebru and Emil Torres, are really strong on this. And Emil Torres just wrote a really fascinating piece, and I think Truth Dig, about how MAGA far-right religious folks are merging with the AI faux philosophies of TESCREAL, and they're eugenicists and also extinctionists. Great. They don't care if we extinguish the human race because they're going to build what's better in AI. This is wacky shit. This is really crazy stuff. And the media coverage of it is too often credulous and just says, well, look what it can do. And they contend it can do this. We'll be at AGI in no time. Tear through the bullshit. But we still end up with technology that's interesting, technology that can do some interesting things. I don't use it to write my stuff, but I find it's helpful in organizing. The best thing I find for the technology right now is it's a great thesaurus. I'm an old guy. I forget a word. I go to Gemini and I say, I'm looking for a word that means this, but not that. And by God, the word is always there. It's just amazing. Because that's what it is. It's a word connection machine. That's all it is. It's a word prediction machine. It can do amazing things in science. It can do amazing things in medicine. We need to keep the human in the loop at all turns. I'm not against AI. I'm for AI. I'm for its development, but I'm against the boys of AI who scare me much more than the machine.
it would seem that there is. I wish I could argue with you. By the way, I got to have. Do you guys argue on those two
Oh yeah.
podcasts?
Oh yeah.
I've seen
Yeah.
you. I've seen you guys disagree.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. On Intelligent Machines, Leo Laporte, who's really good at playing devil's advocate, at provoking discussion. So he plays the accelerationist. He plays the AI is great. Paris Martineau, the co-host, and I like AI, but we hold back and we make fun of that.
So you
And
don't
then
really.
on the other one, AI Inside, Jason Howell and I go through the news in AI, and it raises all kinds of fascinating questions, like what is creativity and what is intelligence, and what does it mean to be human? I'm really interested by those things, not because the AI is all that different, but because it puts a different reflection upon us.
Just to be clear, you don't think there's going to be a major disruption in the job market and thus our economy in the very near future?
No, I don't. And again, anecdotally, will it happen to individuals? Yes, it will. And will that be difficult and unjust? Yes. I just saw a story this week that programmers at Amazon now feel like they're working in the factory because they're being put under great pressure to use AI to be more productive. And so that's a problem, not of the technology, that's a problem of management. And then Duolingo CEO made a big spiel about 2 weeks ago saying we can't hire anybody unless we can prove that AI can't do the job. And he basically threatened all his employees that AI would replace them. Well, what happened? Obviously, it affected morale, and right now he's coming back. He clarified his AI first plan after backlash, says AI won't replace employees because he knows it can't. And it's overboard. He was saying things like that to try to pump his stock. And that's just stupid.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. And I am going to definitely look into all the authors and dig deeper on this issue because I think it's really important for people to get as many views as they can, specifically as it relates to their careers. And I'm thinking a lot about my daughters. If you have kids, whether they're young kids or my daughters are 17 and 20, my oldest is in her second year of school, college. My youngest is a junior high school. And it's like, all right, they're going to head into
What do you think
college.
they're going to end up doing? If you had to ask them today, which it'll change, what would they end up wanting to do?
Well, my older daughter's pretty focused on a career in the world of film, specifically entertainment. She likes directing, writing, editing. Well, she doesn't love editing, acting, and all of that. And right now, she's also a part-time personal trainer. So she's doing well. She's doing really well. My younger daughter has all kinds of different ideas. She hasn't really settled on anything. But my question is about the importance of a college degree given the rapid change of technology. It just seems like I'm always for education. What I'm not for is paying $20, $30, $50,000 a year, taking out loans, whatever, to get a degree after 4 years that, it's you could have learned that on YouTube in 10 weeks or something. And so I wonder about the cost of college, not about education or the experience of what it's like. It's awesome to go to college for 4 years. It's a party. It's fun. It's great socially. So I'm thinking a lot about that as it relates to AI. What career should you choose? How is AI going to affect these different industries? And it just seems like if you're going to law school, which my younger daughter, it's like AI is going to be pretty prominent in writing contracts and doing all kinds of legal work. I'm guessing
the boring crap. And the problem there is it going to be harder to be an intern in these places when
Probably.
AI is going to start to look like interns and sound like interns? I think that's the apprenticeship and training is going to be difficult. But then companies are going to realize that was a great way to get talent in the future, and they're going to have to go back to that. It's more important than ever to be in college. I don't just say that because I work for a university and I'm a fake academic, only a journalism teacher. But the part I would emphasize is the humanities. What's getting attacked all over, not just by the right, but also by the technologists, is the humanities. Well, the great irony of generative AI is if it's so good and if it's so powerful and if it can code for you, we don't need as many coders. We don't need as many computer science majors. What we need instead are anthropologists and political scientists and ethicists and historians. And we need to bring those disciplines into this discussion and into leadership over this technology. One thing I found in the books that I've written is one of my little kind of conclusions or rules is that the technology and the technologist inevitably fades into the background, right? Print was a technology, and the printers were the ones who controlled it, and they decided everything that you could do with it. And radio was a technology, and so on and so on. And the internet was technology. And the internet now is pretty boring to us, and AI will become that way too. And when the technology fades in the background, the technologists also fade in the background, and then we get to take charge of it, the rest of us. And that's what we have to concentrate on. And we have to, I think, teach our next generation and generations how to be humans in charge.
They should be teaching how to use AI in public school right now. Yeah.
So I just this morning saw
rather than being opposed to it and saying, don't use it to write your paper.
Oh, yeah, no, you've got to teach it. You got to teach it, but you got to teach it the right way. So the OECD and EU just put out a framework for AI literacy in K to 12. And I sent it to my university colleagues, not because it was necessarily that relevant to coming up with graduate degrees on the topic, but because it starts to create a language for what it means to consider this. And let me find it real quickly here. So the framework, sorry for dead air time, man. But hey, it's only a podcast.
Dead air time anymore. I feel like when you're watching live on YouTube, but also speaking of dead air time, I was just ranting at our hangout last night about how Mark Levin and classic traditional right-wing radio guys like Rush Limbaugh take the longest pauses and just repeat the sentence they just said with a little bit different emphasis.
So here's the AI framework. Thanks for the vamping there. Theme 1, teaching how AI and machine learning work, right? Just understanding basically to be competent in understanding what it can and can't do. Number 2, human skills to emphasize for successful collaboration with AI tools, right? I wrote a syllabus for a course at Stony Brook this fall on AI and creativity. The point of that course is not to create all kinds of stuff, but to learn about human creativity and human voice and how it teaches you about yourself. Theme 3, AI's effects on individual society and environment, responsibility, what we're doing to ourselves. And then, then it has a bunch of frameworks and stuff, but it's the 4 domains of AI literacy: engaging with the AI, creating with AI, managing AI, designing AI. This is all pretty sensible stuff. And it's meant for curricula, but then it gets you into other areas, right? So it gets you into ethics. What's the fairness, responsibility, benefits and risk, design thinking, coming up with ideas and creativity, media literacy, understanding authority, digital literacy, civility.
I want to take that. That's a really robust, comprehensive curriculum, and you're saying that's a sample for what should be offered K through 12.
Yeah, but I think this language, this framework, this logic to it, I think informs college and even graduate school. So I'm on a committee to create a new degree in technology, AI, and society at Stony Brook. And it's intended not for computer scientists, but for everybody else who want to be competent in AI. So you need to define what AI literacy and competence is. What does it mean to know how it can operate, what it can do, what it can't do? So you don't get bamboozled by the doomsters and the boys.
That's the first step. I get bamboozled by AI all the time. I saw a great white shark was just flopping around on the beach, and there's a whole bunch of people watching it. And I go, that's crazy, man. And then I looked at it for a little while longer. I go, oh, that's not real. That's not a real thing. But it's
Ethan Mollick, who wrote a good book called Co-Intelligence, which is a kind of positive about AI, how to use it. So he just this morning put up video from Veo 3, which is Google's latest video application. And if you look, it's on Twitter in the last 16 hours. He put up a bunch of videos, which he says are made by AI, fully made by AI. And he's a professor, so I believe him. But boy, it's convincing. So for your daughter, this has real impact. Now, we're going to see moral panic about this. We won't know what reality is anymore. We said the same thing with the Kodak camera. We said the same thing with print. Get over yourselves. We're not that unique. But the tools are getting pretty effing impressive. On the one hand, that could eliminate jobs, it could be problems. On the other hand, it allows anyone to express themselves using these tools in ways that we were not capable of doing before. What new creativity can this bring out? I think that's exciting.
You're too positive about it.
But I'm still a critic in a lot of ways. I'm not an accelerationist. I'm not, I think that the boys in charge of AI are all a little wacky, and we've got to expose them for their wackiness.
Is this it? I'm sharing it on the screen. Did it come up?
Yeah, but he has one. That's May 24. No, it's later. It's
Ethan Malik, in case you want to look it up.
If you go to his Twitter feed, and it's like the third one down.
Anyway, for people who are mostly listening to it.
Yeah, that's true.
Let me just finally ask you about one more question. And I appreciate all the insights on AI and all the sources. And I'm going to go back and listen to it and copy all that down. I'd love to hear from people watching and listening their thoughts, whether they agree or disagree, or more than likely have a question for the great Jeff Jarvis. And you should also listen to those two podcasts.
Or an argument, or a challenge.
Or any of it. Or if you would like to spank him in your home. What is your going right now? 20 grand right there. You shared on social media a podcast by Prospect Magazine, which is good. It's called Media Confidential. And they have a recent episode titled Trump v. the New York Times. And I'm really looking forward to both listening to this and discovering this podcast. But it's important to ask you and to discuss the Trump effect on both, obviously, higher education. We've seen everything that's happened with the threats to Harvard, but specifically different corporate news outlets. And specifically, this is talking about the New York Times, I take it, but It could, what are they saying about the Times? What's your view on this? And
so that's a podcast with Alan Rusbridger, former editor of The Guardian, and Lionel Barber, former editor of the Financial Times. So heavyweights. And they have on Joe Kahn, who's the executive editor of the New York Times.
Oh, wow.
And so it's, three major heavyweights of journalism. But it's predictably frustrating to me because Rusbridger asked Kahn a nuanced question. Basically, and I wish I had the wording exactly because it was better than I will do it, but he was basically asking, when will the Times recognize the abnormality and nascent fascism of Trump? And Kahn goes off and comes back with a red herring. Well, nobody says we shouldn't cover Trump. Well, Rusbridger wasn't saying anything of the sort. And then he was also asked whether the Trumpists are a cult and whether they're authoritarian, and he wouldn't use either word. He wouldn't agree to either word. Well, for God's sakes, if that's where we are in the coverage here, that's a dishonesty and a failure of journalism. If you can't start by labeling authoritarianism and fascism, then you can't explain it.
Right.
You can't report on it.
Right.
Then you can't inform the audience about what's actually going on because you're too scared to. And if we're going to argue about words like equity, as if that's now a bad word, and that turns people off. KPCC, the LAist, public radio in Los Angeles, did a bunch of market research about 2 years ago. And this scares me, but they found that the word democracy is now a turnoff.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So if that's where we are, and you refuse to define the words, and also to shame the people who were doing these acts. I go back to what I said about the Portuguese researcher and norms. If we don't reinvigorate norms of disapproval of anti-democratic, anti-black, anti-LGBTQ, anti-woman behavior, then where the hell are we? And if we can't anticipate that our media will at least be there with us, then they fail us. So this is why I call the Times the Broken Times and the Post the Broken Post, is because even though there's still good journalism and good journalists there, all in all, they are failing us in this moment of crisis. But I've done that spiel here before.
Oh, but I always like it, especially as it's updated. All right.
Can I give you one positive thing from the socials?
Yeah, please.
So, by the way, what was your hair color when you had it?
Brown.
Oh, okay, brown. Pretty much me. Auburn, I'd say.
My eyebrows now. They're still brown. That color.
they're even dark gray, I would say.
Easy.
Well, I'm purely white hair. Have you happened on TikTok to see the great trend in gingers are black?
What is it?
Gingers are black. I'll share some links with you after we're off, and you can share them with your audience. It's a beautiful thing. One woman came on TikTok one day, and the way that memes start, and she said, "Gingers, red-haired people, are black. They suffer discrimination and abuse, and I'm decreeing they're black." And what followed was a beautiful combination of black people and red-haired people talking. And what was so great about it, number one, was it was black people saying, we get to decide who's black. You don't label us, we'll decide who's black. And then you had gingers, red-haired people, say, we're honored. And it was just a magnificent little use of social media in a collaborative, building way that I found heartwarming.
Gingers are black trend on TikTok opens up a conversation on race. Oh, I'm going to go check this out.
It's really neat. It's really neat.
Viral TikTok trend is sparking emotional conversations and unlikely solidarity between black users and those with the red hair.
Where is that run? Where did that run? Because I haven't seen it in mainstream media at all.
Oh, no. This is at BET.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, BET's covering it. And obviously it's treading on delicate turf whenever you get to race, but it's a wonderful thing. And it's filled with humor. Right?
I'll bet. Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
So it's not pronounced ginger anymore because an ER is a deprecating word that you could control and not use. It's ginger. There's a wonderful video of a black guy and a red-haired friend putting a do-rag on his head and going down the street together. It's just, but it's also serious things of people with red hair saying, I'm by no means have I faced anything that any black person has ever faced, but I've had problems in life too. People, because of the color of my hair, say these horrible things about me.
That's why I'm starting today. I'm starting bald whites are black.
No, it doesn't work. Nope.
You don't think I should?
Nope. And it's not up to you to say it. Lesson 1. Lesson 2, you got a little bit of crap because you're bald, but hey.
You have, no.
You can't do it.
People of color do not know the struggle of a white bald.
He's joking, folks. He's joking. Don't. He's
when we go out in the sun.
Well, that was another thing.
Without a hat.
Somebody saying, the black guy saying, listen, you're in now, but let me tell you, don't hang out in the sun. You can't do that. You're going to be a lobster.
I love it. I love that.
The other great part is you're in now, but don't try to bring a dish to the cookout.
That's good.
No. It's a beautiful thing. So I just wanted to end on a more positive moment.
I love it.
When people can be people together and social media brings them together in an unpredictable way like that, it's a wonderful thing to witness.
Very well done. Thank you so much for joining me, sir. I really appreciate it.
As always, a pleasure.
Click leave studio because I just invited my friend. He's going to jump in and talk Russia, Ukraine, unless you want to stay and talk Russia, Ukraine.
I got to go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was awesome.
Right. Bye.
Yep. There he goes, Jeff Jarvis. I hope it didn't take him long. I don't know. He didn't tell me. Bill Boyle, everybody, now joining me. Look at that. Bonus guest. I don't hear you, though. I think you're muted. Is that possible? See, when you go live, you can't figure these things out. I still don't hear him. Here he comes. Anyway, I was thinking that I wanted to talk with Bill about Russia, Ukraine. I feel like it's such a important inflection point right now. So those of you that are watching live, stay with us because we're going to talk about that next. And he's going to also weigh in on this whole democratic outreach and strategy to men and boys, Fetterman and Rahm. Jeff Jarvis just throw Rahm and Fetterman out together. All right, let's now try.
Sorry, buddy. My computer is acting strange. So
works just fine. You look good. You sound good. Thank you for joining me.
Sure.
Before we get to Russia, Ukraine, let's just talk about what I was talking with Jeff Jarvis about in terms of Democrats and the strategy and there's a lot of conversation about outreach to men. Apparently there was some investment of like $20 million into how to talk. I didn't read about it. Something, I just read the headlines. And then of course, you've heard all this, but then Rahm Emanuel and John Fetterman need to get tossed out because they're too far to the right, too far to the center. Talk to me just about the Democrats, their outreach, and where you see the strategy.
So I would say that actually Rahm Emanuel and Fetterman are two very different situations. Rahm Emanuel is, as much as he is controversial, highly, highly effective. And he gets things done, but he screws up because he really kind of goes for it in pretty intense ways. He did a bad job in Chicago. So Rahm Emanuel, I don't love him. I think that time has passed. He's too old. He's also just kind of a different era of the Democratic Party. Fetterman, on the other hand, is literally complaining that he's being asked to do his job in Congress and is very much going down the cinema route. And by the way, the cinema route is different from the Joe Manchin route. Joe Manchin actually produced a lot of good things for Democrats. But Fetterman I know Adam Gentleson, who was quoted extensively on that article about Fetterman, and Adam has him dead to rights. Fetterman shouldn't be there because he's not capable of doing the job. And his latest act is sort of this thing of like, I can't believe I'm being forced to go to committee meetings. The people elected you. You have an obligation. This is a sacred trust that you're given as a senator. And so that's where I think those two sit. They're kind of different stories. Now, as far as where the Democratic Party is going, every single political party does this when they lose badly. Every single one. Republicans, the last time they got crushed, spent a year flipping out about what they were going to do. You'll lose. There's recriminations. And the Democratic Party clearly is in transition. I don't know, by the way, if it's going in the direction that anyone expects it to go in, because if you had looked at the Democratic Party in 2006, you would never have predicted Obama. I think I have sympathy with Matty Iglesias, even though people hate him. But he says a thing that I think is important, which is you have to go where the voters are. That being said, he overstates the case because sometimes you have to go where you think things are going to be 2 years from now.
Well, hard to know the answer to either. Well,
so here's the answer to the question.
Okay.
Do what you think is right. Some of you are going to win, some of you are going to lose. But do what you think is right. And the voters and time will pick who had the right approach. The big thing, though, and the number one thing is for the average voter, the average Democrat, is you can't just like out somebody from respectable society because you agree with them on 85% of things, but you don't on another 15%. You see this on Blue Sky and Twitter and everywhere else where like there's such intense purity tests. I would say the big thing for Democrats going forward is get rid of purity tests. If I agree with somebody about everything but abortion, I don't have to have him be with me on abortion. I don't. If I agree with somebody 100% on everything but Elon Musk, who you know how much I abhor, I'm going to vote for the guy if I agree with him on everything
else. The one that currently divides a lot of people, the purity test, is on Gaza. And so there are some Democrats that are very pro-Israel, obviously, and yet they might be extremely progressive in almost every domestic policy issue. And I think that's one that really divides people, and the purity test there is hard. You mentioned abortion first, obviously, but I feel like Israel's the one.
And I'll give you a good example. I am a supporter of Israel who absolutely abhors what Israel is doing in Gaza. And actually, as a supporter of Israel, I think what they're doing in Gaza you couldn't have picked a worse thing for the future of the Israeli state. Than to do what they're doing.
That's a politician can't say that if he has no room for nuance with his Israeli supporting constituents. Like you're not.
I think you can. I mean, I think that you should, if that's what you believe right now, because the future public opinion is not exogenous to what's happening out in the world, right? Like things in Israel things in Gaza and in Israel are going to change. Just as the Iraq War, it looked in 2006 like you could not oppose the Iraq War and be in politics. And 2 years later, it was disastrous to have been supporting of it. are supportive of it. So I think you have to go with, and by the way, I think honesty is really a big deal. I think being authentic to what you actually believe in the end works better. And I think that that's where Democrats have to be. I think all of this sort of ideological point shaving that everybody's doing is really stupid. I think you don't know what's going to really work, even in 2026. And I think so you should stick with and push what you really believe, because that's the thing about Trump, by the way, that a lot of voters like, who are in the middle, wishy-washy swing voters, late-breaking voters. They like authenticity, clearly. And however toxic Trump is, he feels authentic to them.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder how the question around authenticity is interpreted amongst Democratic voters or progressives or liberals. I think it's a different kind of idea. The way, I mean, his authenticity is to be just a flagrant asshole,
The worst, yeah.
this racist prick. And a Democrat's authenticity could be a wide range of different things, from Jamie Raskin to Jasmine Crockett. So
to Bernie.
Bernie.
But I will tell you, it's a commonplace to meet someone who likes Trump but also likes Bernie.
Well, then you start talking about issues and nobody gives a shit. We're joined by Big Beautiful Boyle, according to Rob Dog. Big Beautiful Boyle joins us. What do you make of the reconciliation bill passed by the House last week, now up for discussion in the Senate? There's like 8 senators that are pretty openly opposed to it, but they'll all sign it, right?
I don't know. I mean, I think it is. I mean, I know that it is the greatest transfer of money to the rich in American history. And I think that if you're looking ahead to 2026, 2028, and you're in the Senate, you got to be worried about how this is going to affect you then. So I think that there's going to be a pretty intense push from those 8 to maybe 12. There's more than you might think that are out there to modify, ameliorate, chill out, like particularly on Medicare. Thune is not dumb. Thune is smart. Thune knows Trump is 79 years old. And when Trump goes, Trump is personally responsible for most of the margin that gets Republicans winning. When he's gone, there's nobody to replace him. So if you're Thune, do you want to 2 years from now be saying, oh shit, what are we going to do? Trump's gone and Democrats are hanging this bill around our neck, cutting Medicare from 13 million people around our neck? Probably not. So I would not. Trump's not as strong as people think he is. The Republicans in the Senate are a lot smarter than Republicans in the House. And I think you might be surprised at how much it changes.
They might not be smarter. They just have a completely different electorate that they have to.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's some pretty dumb senators. But
yeah,
my understanding is that the bill is smartly designed to not have actual effects cut specifically to Medicaid that affect you until 28, 29, until they get reelected. I may be wrong about that, but it matters when the policy is going to affect. It only matters when people feel a thing for them to be affect their vote, right?
Yeah and no. I mean, I think you'll see effects right away, not just tied to Medicare. You're going to see a lot of different effects. They make all kinds. The bill, by the way, is gigantic and has all kinds of things in it.
It's crazy.
That, again, this is where predicting the future is difficult, because maybe Medicare isn't an issue yet by 2026, but the vote's still out there. And Democrats can point to that vote and say to folks, hey, you realize very shortly you're going to lose your money. Or a great example is it's going to really hurt us on debt very badly, very quickly. And that's, it's going to make things like borrowing money to buy a house or a car more expensive. And that's going to happen right away, regardless of how much things are delayed, because banks are getting very worried about adding, I think it's $3 trillion in debt just as one bill.
As a result of the reconciliation bill passing, the bond markets are scared because of the debt and deficit it creates. I just read that yesterday, and I was like, oh, so they're looking, bond markets are paying attention to long-term deficits and
Absolutely.
what that's going to mean for treasury bonds, right? And like, I didn't hear that question get asked to Mike Johnson, and maybe it did by either of the two Sunday news corporate news anchors that got a shot at him. And all he did was lie about what the bill is going to do. But
which is really a thing, right? You think about it, like they can't pass the bill unless they totally lie about what's in it.
well, that's why they did it in the middle of the night. I mean, Obamacare was healthcare reform, and so it was pretty big. It wasn't nearly as big as this, I don't think, though. And it was negotiated in committee for weeks and weeks and weeks. I covered it, that debate. I mean, they had open debates, they had closed debates, they had negotiations with the stakeholders, obviously, pharmaceuticals and insurers and all the rest. I mean, it was massive, and this was passed in the middle of the night, literally overnight, and it's going to be
a bill people are ashamed of having supported.
I hope you're right. Right.
Let me just say, Rand Paul, I remember you just quoted him, put a clip up from him last week before.
I always quote Rand Paul.
But I mean, the fact that you and I are approvingly saying Rand Paul said X and it's really great tells you how bad this bill is.
Yeah.
That Rand Paul is going, this is nuts. This is fiscally incredibly irresponsible. Yeah. And he's right. Tells you how bad it is.
Hey, before I get to Ukraine, Russia, I got one more question for you. I just saw this article today I thought was pretty interesting about CNN. CNN.com has this article about how the next couple of weeks are really going to determine some things around the economy, because a whole bunch of different pieces of data will be coming up. Now I can't find. Anyway, just on the question of the tariffs, their effect, and the economy right now. What are you seeing? Owning garages, obviously, it's always a really interesting harbinger in terms of what you're thinking about long term, but obviously what you're seeing on a regular basis in your garages. But what do you think, just quickly, about the current status and forecasts for the economy, given the confusion around tariffs?
So basically what we're seeing, both in retail parking, like people coming out to dinner, that sort of thing, and what we're seeing in commercial real estate, everyone's holding on to their money. So you're seeing dips in like weekends, slower business. People are, and again, we're in mostly DC, but we're also in other markets outside of DC where we're seeing the same thing, where people are keep holding on to their money. So what's going on in effect is there's a ton of uncertainty. Trump was going to hit Europe with 50%. Then he dropped it. Now he's talking about some other tariffs. Like, you never know what you're going to get. The amount of uncertainty is higher than it's been since, probably 1929. And all that uncertainty means people don't spend their money. I don't hire. People, in related businesses don't build factories. You just wait. You hold on to your money. And of course, that nails the economy in terms of growth. It hurts hiring. It hurts innovation. It hurts everything, because Congress won't take back their power on tariffs from the president. They're allowing him to do all these insane, quote unquote, emergency tariffs. And then that's a killer. That's an absolute killer. The number one asset of the American economy is its predictability, its safety, its immunity heretofore from just, someone interfering and screwing things up. And we've apparently decided to allow that now. And it's, so the uncertainty really, it's funny because you say this and you think someone's going to give you like a complicated explanation of what's happening with imports or whatever. I have friends that are economists. The uncertainty is the thing that scares the crap out of them. They're like, that's just death. That's death. So that's kind of where we're at. We're waiting. We're waiting for a bunch of shoes to drop. I think this summer is really we're going to see significant headwinds. And by headwinds, I mean, people are going to lose their jobs. The economy's going to go south. Inflation's going to go up. I think that's what we're heading into.
Okay. Well, I saw that you were hanging out, and when I was talking to Jarvis, and I said, if you're available, I'd love to talk to you about the latest in Ukraine, Russia. So that originally is why I asked you to come, but I appreciate the last, 20 minutes you've given me on all these other issues, but I wanted to get your take. I mean, basically, I don't know how you want to recap it, but it's just like, it's exhausting and so maddening and frustrating that Trump is like acting like Putin's a bad guy and is doing bad things, and this isn't the guy I knew when like we knew this 25 years ago. There's nothing new at all about Vladimir Putin, and that's what everybody's saying. That's the conventional wisdom. So it's just really frustrating that Trump is like, you know what, maybe I can't make a deal with this guy, even though of course he said he's going to end the war on day one. What are your thoughts about what his reaction is and what it means, and what does it also mean about all the people who are saying that Putin owns him?
So as I've said to you many times, I don't think Putin owns him. I think that Trump reacts the way he does to Putin out of affinity. He likes him. He wants to be that kind of dictator.
That's it.
He wants power, naked power, and he wants to be able to push around these oligarchs who, when
And he
Trump
wants, by the way, he also, just to be clear, wants his help for his interests. So he has an affinity for him, wants to be like him. That's the perfect answer. But it also, I think it matters that he also invited him to help him win the election in 2006. So he wants his help on his business interests and helping him win the election. But then when it comes time to governing, sorry.
Well, no, but Trump doesn't govern, period. I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing is the destruction of the idea of government. He spends all his time. I mean, Scott Galloway had a great line. He said, if Trump was as good as governing as he is at corruption, we'd have the greatest government in the world. The amount of time and effort they spend on the various meme coins and whatever, that's where they're putting all their time. They don't care about actually governing the country, which ironically is where he really is different from Putin. Putin immerses himself in the minutia of government to have more control. Trump's happy to let a bunch of underlings run around and kind of do things. And when he feels like jumping on board, he does. When he feels like they screwed up, he just, cuts the limb off that they're sitting on and lets them go. But I think with Russia, what's happening right now is, number one, Trump made a campaign promise, a very prominent one, and he's never going to be able to deliver on it. So he is setting up the conditions where he can just say, I'm done. My hands are clean. I'm out. A thing, though, that Trump did in the first Trump administration was he did put a lot of sanctions on Russia, which is a thing people forget. I think this time around, Trump's never running again. I don't think he feels like he needs Putin for anything. And so I don't think there's the drive to appease or help or whatever Putin that there was before. But that being said, Trump is just so locked in to what he's believed forever that you can't shift him for very long. So, for instance, when he condemned Putin for attacking Ukraine terribly with, missile and airstrikes in the last couple of days, he still tacks on at the end that this is all Zelensky's and Biden's fault. Like Trump just has an ID fix and that's it. And the facts don't matter to him because he hasn't been made to pay for those facts. I will tell you that the Pentagon is delivering aid to Ukraine quite quickly right now, but they're being told to hold back on air defense equipment. Now, that's something that's probably not commonly known. They've been slowing down delivery of air defense missiles and associated equipment. That makes me really raise an eyebrow because that's the only way Putin can win if he can just grind down the Ukrainians by just blowing up their infrastructure until they just can't function. It's still hard, still incredibly hard. The Ukrainians' will to fight is gigantic and immense and incredible. But, I mean, is there the possibility that Trump has sort of just made a quiet deal? Like, I'm going to kind of hold back on the things the Ukrainians need most? Maybe. And I could easily see as well that Trump just kind of stops helping them, just doesn't go on Putin's side, but just kind of let's go what's going to already ordered, and then that's it.
I thought I heard something this morning, but can the United States Senate override Trump on supporting Ukraine with weapons? And it's possible politically that they might. There'd be enough Republicans to do that. It'd be weird to see, by the way, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's been a Russia hawk his whole life, stand with Trump against his former Republican colleagues who he led against Russia. I think.
Oh, yeah. No, Rubio is the classic example of a small man in search of a balcony. And he's finally, got one. He's sort of the he's the Raul Castro
What happens on? What do you mean?
this
I don't know what that
administration.
phrase means. Actually, I laughed at it, but then I realized what happens on the balcony. Are they going to jump
Oh,
or?
it's the guy Jimmy Breslin said this about Rudy Giuliani 30 years ago or longer. A small man in search of a balcony was comparing Giuliani to Mussolini and saying, like, Mussolini was a short guy who used to like to get on balconies and scream and give these big speeches. And this was Jimmy Breslin 30 years ago identifying that Giuliani had fascist tendencies. And it's a cutting phrase that was perfect. It really pissed off Giuliani at the time. And it fits. You know, these guys, they're not just physically small, they are small men. And like Rubio, whose family escaped a dictatorship, who, you know, was on the right side of a lot of these issues for decades. In the end, he looks and says, okay, if I can't be president myself, but I can claw my way in to hold on to a little bit of power, I'm going to abase myself and give up all of my ideals to do it. It's all very, you know, Vichy collaborationist kind of stuff. And I mean, I say that not even really jokingly. I mean, that's exactly
No, it's
thing
parallel. It would seem, if you understand, and I think I've learned about that from you here, history. If you understand history, and
yeah,
there's,
I mean, it's the
parallels.
you know, there's various Germans, you know, who were German conservatives who helped the Nazis get into power. And a guy named Fritz von Papen. So when you hear me, or you see me write on like someone's von Papening themselves, it's like the guy who helped Hitler to get to power and then was killed on the night of the Long Knives a year later, right?
If I saw you write somebody's von Papening themselves, I would make fun of you for that.
That's what I like about it. Well, it's got, you know, if you don't know the history, it could possibly have like a vaguely sexual connotation, which is what makes me laugh at it. People are very curious. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, and by the way, I'll tell you that, you know, Ukraine is just demolishing the Russian military, but the Russians in the last month have finally started producing missiles and drones equal to their usage each month, and that's bad. They're now able to start building up a stockpile of missiles and drones, and that's really bad. At the same time, it's still just a brutal grind for them, and they're losing just gigantic amounts of men and material every month. And you two punch drunk fighters, and we'll see who is still standing when somebody falls. So
that's your current state of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ukrainians have incredible will, and they are incredibly innovative in how they're fighting this. They've reinvented warfare in the last 3 years with drones and everything else. Tanks are now obsolete. All kinds of systems are obsolete because of what the Ukrainians have done and that the Russians have learned from. You know, the Ukrainians hit a Russian fuel train 50 miles behind the lines that was trailing a fiber optic cable, so it was unjammable. And they managed to send a fiber optic cable attached to a drone 50 miles behind the lines and destroy it. Very, very important fuel train.
I read about that. I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of the craziest, a 50-mile long cable.
Yeah. And that's like, you know, maybe 3 or 4 hairs thin. And because the signal is going down the cable, it's not really jammable.
Right.
But
is that scalable?
Oh, I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of them operating right now. That's the future. People talk about, you know, AI drones. That's really fine, whatever. But right now you have effectively unjammable drones attached to fiber optic cables that are going dozens of miles into Russian territory.
You're saying that tactic, and man, it's if it wasn't so horrible, it would be fascinating, and I guess it still is, to watch the technology, wartime technology, adapt in this war by these two countries and their proxy supporters. But you're pointing that out as a way to say that Ukraine is scrappy and adaptable and finding new ways to fight the conventional weaponry of the Russians, creating this kind of stalemate, or are you? Yeah,
that's correct. I mean, there are parts of the line where there's almost no Ukrainian infantry on the line because they have such intense drone coverage that they basically just have tripwires that people who see where the Russians are coming and they obliterate them with drones and then mop them up afterwards. Then they send troops in to mop them up. So Ukraine's, in terms of manpower, is getting to fight this war on the cheap. And that's great because manpower is an incredibly big problem for them. So it's changing how the war's being fought. Interestingly, if you're a gigantic nerd like me, the way the Ukrainians are fighting this war is the way that we intended on fighting a war in Europe if nukes are being thrown around. Spread everybody out as much as you possibly can. You never concentrate your troops. And if you concentrate, you die, obviously. And because of drones, that's what's happened in this war. If you concentrate, you're dead. And so the Russians are sending guys over the line on mopeds and motorcycles, right? To just get them to wherever they're going as fast as possible, because protection doesn't really matter that much anymore. A tank is just a magnet for drones and can't do the job that it's assigned to do. So all the military doctrine of the Cold War and World War II is pretty much out the window right now.
The traditional way in modern warfare to kill a tank is from the air, and it's
or another tank.
If you don't have an air force or a bunch of fighter jets, then tanks are going to be pretty effective until you develop a tiny little unmanned drone that can drop a warhead of some sort directly on top of a tank. There's nothing the tank can do to stop that drone, it would seem, much less small arms or almost anything else.
Well, think about trying to shoot a drone that's got an RPG warhead on it that's coming at you going 40 miles an hour through the trees, right? Yeah, it's just, and the problem is that, a tank can only get so heavy. So you can add reactive armor to the roof and to the sides and everything else, but in the end, you end up with this box that, and the bigger thing too, by the way, Pete, it's not just the drones that can do a drone strike. It's that the drones can see everything. The battlefield becomes transparent. And regular old artillery is deadly also. If you know where every Russian is on the battlefield, 150 millimeter shell is great also. You don't need necessarily even a drone. You don't need a drone with a bomb on it at that point. So it's transparent battlefields with, incredibly flexible munition delivery. And that makes it incredibly hard to run an offense. And the Russians just did a 14-kilometer advance the other day. It's the biggest one they've done in months. Like, they're just eating away, but eroding a little bit at a time, Ukrainian territory, but for unbelievable casualties. I think their casualties altogether right now are over 1 million.
It's unbelievable. I just can't fathom that when the outrage in America over the 2,000 or more than 2,000 lost in Iraq, and I think total like 4,000 in Iraq and 2,000 in Afghanistan or something. The total number over 20 years, people were outraged, and then you think about the after effects. That, like, if you pay attention to the veterans community, and they were obviously on stage over the weekend, and people's a lot of thoughts were with people who are suffering from any kind of injuries, certainly a moral injury or PTSD of some sort. And if you think about just those Americans, those Russians and Ukrainians are no different in terms of how wars affect them the rest of their lives. So it's one thing to say the number of dead, which is unfathomable, but the number that are going to be broken for the rest of time. And one understanding I have is that I heard an analysis, I don't think I was talking to you, that Putin needs to keep the war going because all these guys that are fighting, if they come back, there's not jobs, and he's on a war economy. Like, a lot of the economy is upheld by supporting the war. Is that analysis accurate?
Sure. I mean, well, look at it this way. Just think of the social and economic implications of the fact that 1 million men, which comes out to about 6% of all military-age males in Russia, are either dead or physically completely broken.
I mean, I can't even imagine. I can't.
So 1 in every 18 guys is done, either totally dead or lost a leg and is PTSD and whatever. So that doesn't seem like a ton. That's a gigantic number. It's a gigantic number. And, this regime has clearly shown that it's got a glass jaw. I mean, Prigozhin almost overthrew it without even meaning to. And that should tell you, like, the Russian security services just stepped aside and let Prigozhin go towards Moscow. And the guys who ran those security services all kept their jobs.
Right.
Which is the big tell, which is that Putin's like, shit, I can't fire these guys. They'll kill me. So it's totally a house of cards. It's just a question of if someone can just knock a crucial jack of diamonds out of it and let the whole thing fall down. And I'm not sure Ukraine can. I would love it if they do. We'll see.
Certainly does seem to make strategic sense to make a minor investment in supporting them fighting this war, which clearly Europe has done, and the rest of the world is fully in.
Yeah, so I will tell you that I was talking to a buddy who's an expert on this stuff. He was rather inebriated, so take this with a grain of salt. But he was saying that he thinks the Europeans are not going to end up doing enough. I tend to disagree. I think they can, but this is a diplomat who deals with European
Guys like him are
government.
never satisfied.
I'm sorry.
I said guys like him are never satisfied. I don't know who you're talking about.
Well, no, no. I mean, he has been dealing with European governments for 30 years, so that he's used to a scenario where they never ever fulfill what they say they're going to do.
That's his bias.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, but if the Europeans really do show up, they can invest enough for the Ukrainians to win. The $65 million question is whether they will.
Before you go, one more question that I asked Jeff Jarvis earlier that I've just been thinking about since yesterday. I understand why people get frustrated when they can't understand why people support Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to explain, well, they're different. They follow a whole different source and different values and different morals, and they're different set of thinking. That's how I understand it. But then he does or says something that makes you fall into that category of thinking, which is, how could they possibly support this guy? And to me, a lot of people who support Trump try to act like the ultimate patriots and the jingoism and using the military and just really rhetorically and not actually doing anything. And to see what he did at West Point and then what he did yesterday at Arlington, and then his posts saying Happy Memorial Day to all the scum, and leaving West Point and not shaking hands. Now, going back to my criticism, hey, maybe MAGAs don't know that he left without shaking hands and went and golfed. Maybe they don't know. But if they do know, or if they did read those posts, it's so gross in terms of his treatment of those at West Point or those we've lost Memorial Day, that you would think that some people are like, that is way out of line. Somebody somewhere, certainly not in his cabinet. So I just wanted to ask you if you had any thoughts about that kind of behavior when it comes to like Memorial Day and West Point and dealing with active duty, much less veterans community.
So I think those people are cooked, that they're in their silo. They see the same, they're listening to Fox. They're in an epistemic closure. They're in a bubble.
Right.
And they just don't, and by the way, I mean, it's not just Fox. When you read the New York Times and how they describe Trump, they don't say this was a rambling, insane, and disrespectful diatribe again, about America and West Point. They say, Trump really made some ultra remarks, right? There's like a ton of sane washing that goes on. And I think that is to some degree due to the fact that they're intimidated and they're knuckling under. They don't just say, like, Drudge. Drudge is really instructive to read, because you read Drudge and you read the New York Times, and Drudge says Trump has another crazy fucking rant. And the New York Times is, Trump shocks the sensibilities of blah, blah, blah. Like, there's a ton of knuckling under that's already happening that already affects how normal people hear what he's doing. Almost nobody sits and actually watches a clip of the speech. Almost nobody. They get it mediated through other outlets, and a lot of which either valorize him or they're afraid of retaliation, and so they soften everything. I have relatives, close relatives, who hate Trump, but every time I talk to them, you know what they bitch about? The Democratic Party. They bitch about the Democrats endlessly, and I say to them, or they bitch about, they're all mad about Biden having not maybe been totally honest about his mental health, or his prostate or whatever.
Right. Well,
and I had this conversation this weekend with some relatives. I'm like, who gives a shit? Biden's gone. You've got a guy doing incredibly bad things to our foreign policy, to our economy or your liberties. Who gives a shit about Biden? Like, why is this even a thing we care about anymore? But they're cooked. They keep coming back to, well, if Democrats had only done blah, 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 blah. And as you know, because I can be a gigantic asshole, I say to them, what did you do in the election? What do you mean? What did you do to influence the Democratic Party? How much money did you give? Did you do phone banking? Did you go out door to door? What did you do? And of course, that is considered to be like totally unfair. Well, I was busy. I was this. I was that. Well, you didn't contribute, then fuck you.
They want to complain about.
Oh, Democrats. They just complain. And this is like, people get to vicariously be involved in what's happening, but they don't actually have to put any skin or money or effort into the game. And they feel empowered, and they can say to me, "Oh, Bill, that fucking smartass from DC, I can tell him he's dumb because I read this, 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 and this." And and my way around that, I finally came to that solution, was to say, what like, I don't care what you think you know. Tell me what you fucking did.
Yeah, and
I don't think Democrats are doing the right thing. Go give money. Go volunteer. Go talk to your congressman. Other than that, you're just another useless mouth sounding off.
I think that's a generally good value, to try to be the change you want to see, and rather than just talk about, being a good person, rather than just talk about exercising or eating right or being mentally well, and actually do the thing. So in general, when it certainly is true when it comes to politics or anything that we want to complain the most about. All right, well, you're not Jeff Jarvis. Anybody who just joined thinking it was Jeff, it's Bill Boyle.
I'm not. Yeah. By the way, I should point out, just a caveat to everyone out there: when you ask people what they did and you hold them to account for it, it doesn't make you popular.
Oh no, yeah, but that's fine. I wish you would record those. Those would be good.
I wouldn't do that to my relatives, but it's
say their names.
Yeah,
when their identities, we can disguise their voices. I just want the content.
Got it.
Thank you very much.
I will consider it.
I appreciate you joining me, buddy. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
I'll be back.
I hope this isn't going. You're not putting this online anywhere, are you?
We were live on YouTube.
Awesome. Excellent.
I'm gonna hit end, but I will be back here on YouTube at noon today, if you're still listening, with Christian Finnegan is going to stop by.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I would love to do a thing with Christian Finnegan where he could shame me for my lack of musical knowledge relative to him.
Oh, wow, that would be interesting.
Yeah,
that would be interesting, because you're still pretty good.
Yeah, no, but he is like next level, like PhD level music nerd. So
yeah. Thank you very much for joining me, buddy. I appreciate it. I'll be back at noon with Christian, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks.
Pleasure, brother. Cheers.